I never imagined that a cold October morning would change my life forever. I woke up at 5 a.m. like always, fed Luna, my German Shepherd partner, and we headed out for what I thought would be just another routine call. A missing person in the woods near Riverside Estate? Probably a hiker who wandered off trail, I told myself. We'd find them, bring them home safe, and be back by lunch. But when we arrived at the scene, something felt different. There were white ribbons tied to the trees, flower petals scattered on the ground, and I could hear voices in the distance, frantic and desperate. A wedding coordinator ran up to me, mascara streaming down her face. "She's been missing for 3 hours," she sobbed. "The ceremony was supposed to start at noon. We've searched everywhere." My heart sank. A bride, lost in the woods on her wedding day. I looked down at Luna, her brown eyes focused and ready, and I felt that familiar surge of purpose, mixed with fear. What if we didn't find her in time? What if something terrible had happened? We entered the forest, and Luna immediately picked up a scent. The woods were dense, and morning fog clung to everything like a cold blanket. I could barely see 10 feet ahead. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. How does a bride disappear on her wedding day? Was she running from something? Someone? Every minute that passed felt like an hour. Then Luna stopped. Her ears perked up, and she pulled hard to the left, off the main path into thick underbrush. I trusted her completely. I always have. We pushed through branches and thorns, my uniform getting caught on everything. But I didn't care. Luna was locked onto something, and then I heard it. A soft crying, barely audible over the wind. "Hello?" I called out. "Can you hear me?" "Help!" came a weak voice. "Please, I'm here." We found her sitting against a tree, her white dress torn and muddy, her veil tangled in the branches above her. She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face, and in that moment, she wasn't a bride or a stranger or anything else. She was just someone who needed help, and I was there to give it. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to hear more incredible real-life moments like this one. I knelt beside her and wrapped my jacket around her shoulders. "You're safe now," I whispered. "We've got you." Luna's nose pressed against the muddy ground, moving in quick, deliberate patterns as I watched her work. The forest had become our adversary that morning, thick with fog and shadows that seemed to swallow sound itself. I could hear the search party calling in the distance, their voices growing fainter as we moved deeper into the woods, following a scent only Luna could detect. My hands were shaking. I tried to hide it, but the truth is, I was terrified. 3 hours is a long time for someone to be lost, especially someone in a wedding dress, not exactly equipped for wilderness survival. The temperature had dropped overnight, and I knew hypothermia could set in faster than most people realize. Every second counted, and the weight of that responsibility pressed down on my chest like a stone. Luna suddenly changed direction, pulling me toward a steep embankment I hadn't noticed before. My heart dropped. "Easy, girl," I whispered, but she was insistent, nearly dragging me forward. The ground was slick with fallen leaves and morning dew. One wrong step, and we could both go tumbling down. I radioed back to base. "We're heading down the ravine on the east side. The terrain is difficult. If we find her here—" I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't want to imagine what condition she might be in if she'd fallen. The descent was treacherous. I had to grab onto tree roots and rocks to keep from sliding. Luna moved with the confidence of a creature born for this, her paws finding purchase where I saw only mud. Branches whipped across my face, and I could feel thorns tearing at my arms, but I pushed forward, Somewhere down there was a woman who'd started her day expecting the happiest moment of her life, and instead found herself alone and lost. Then Luna barked, not her usual alert bark, but something different, something urgent. She'd found something. I scrambled down the last few feet and saw it, a piece of white fabric caught on a branch, fluttering like a flag of surrender. My pulse quickened. "Luna, seek," I commanded, and she was off, nose to the ground, moving with renewed intensity along the bottom of the ravine. The fog was thicker down here, settling in the low places like a living thing. I could barely see 15 feet ahead. My radio crackled with static, the signal weak this deep in the woods. I was essentially on my own, trusting a dog, and my training against an environment that didn't care about deadlines or ceremonies or broken hearts. Luna stopped again, her whole body rigid, pointing like a compass toward something I couldn't yet see. And then I heard it. That soft, desperate crying that would haunt my dreams for weeks to come. "Please," the voice called out, so weak I almost missed it. "Is someone there?" "I'm here," I shouted, crashing through the underbrush. "Keep talking. Let me hear your voice." And there she was. People always ask me why I became a K9 handler. They expect some dramatic story, some life-changing moment that set me on this path. But the truth is simpler and harder to explain. I've always believed that showing up matters, that doing the work, even when no one's watching, even when it's cold and dark and every bone in your body wants to quit, that's what defines us. That morning, as I knelt beside that bride in her torn, muddy dress, none of the usual questions crossed my mind. I didn't wonder who she was, how much money her family had, or why such an elaborate wedding was happening at Riverside Estate. I saw a human being in distress, shivering and afraid, and my job was clear: get her out safely. I've been doing this work for 7 years now. 7 years of training in all weather conditions, of crawling through places most people would never go, of trusting Luna with my life and knowing she trusts me with hers. People see the uniform and think it's glamorous, but they don't see the 4 a.m. wake-ups, the endless drills, the certifications you have to maintain, the emotional toll of the searches that don't end well. But this is what I signed up for. This is what I choose, every single day. As I assessed the bride's condition, checking for injuries with hands that had done this 100 times before, I felt that familiar focus settle over me. She had scratches on her arms, her ankle was swollen, probably twisted when she fell, and she was showing early signs of shock. Her lips were tinged blue, her skin cold to the touch. I immediately wrapped my jacket around her, then my emergency blanket, talking to her in the calm, steady voice I'd practiced until it became second nature. "My name's Sarah," I told her, rubbing her arms to generate warmth. "This is Luna. We're going to get you home, but I need you to stay with me, okay? Keep talking. Tell me your name." "Emma," she whispered through chattering teeth. "I'm Emma." "Okay, Emma. You're doing great. You're safe now." Luna pressed close to Emma's other side, sharing her body heat. I'd trained her to do this, but watching it never got old. This dog, this incredible animal, understood on some instinctive level that her warmth could save a life. I radioed for a stretcher team, gave them our coordinates, and settled in to wait. Emma was crying softly, apologizing over and over. "I ruined everything," she kept saying. "My wedding, everyone's day. I'm so stupid." "Hey," I said firmly, making her look at me. "You're not stupid. You got lost. It happens. What matters is that you're alive, and we found you. Everything else can be fixed." She looked at me with such gratitude, such raw vulnerability, that I felt my own throat tighten. This job requires you to stay professional, to maintain boundaries, but in moments like these, you can't help but feel. You can't help but care. While we waited for the team to reach us, I told Emma about other rescues, kept her mind occupied, monitored her vitals. This is what dedication looks like. Not headlines or recognition, but sitting in the mud with a stranger, making sure they know they're not alone, making sure they survive. When I heard the search team calling out, getting closer, I felt that familiar mix of relief and exhaustion wash over me. Another successful rescue, another person going home to their loved ones. Luna looked up at me, her tail wagging slightly, and I scratched behind her ears. "Good girl," I whispered. "Such a good girl." This is why I do this work. Not for gratitude or reward, but because somewhere out there, someone always needs help. And I choose, every single day, to be the person who shows up. Luna came into my life 4 years ago as a 10-week-old puppy, with oversized paws and ears that flopped when she ran. I remember the first time I held her, this tiny ball of fur with eyes that seemed to look straight into my soul. The trainer told me, "This one's special. She's got the drive." But drive means nothing without trust, and trust takes time. Those early months were grueling. People think canine training is about teaching commands, but it's so much deeper than that. It's about building a language between two entirely different species. It's about learning to read the subtle shift in her posture, the change in her breathing, the way her ears twitch when she catches a scent. And it's about her learning to trust that when I ask her to search in the dark, to climb into dangerous places, to push her body to its limits, I'm right there with her. I'd failed with my first canine partner. That's something I don't talk about often, but it's true. Max was a beautiful Belgian Malinois, smart and eager, but I couldn't connect with him. I was too rigid, too focused on perfect execution, and he could sense my anxiety. We washed out of certification together, and the shame of that failure nearly made me quit. But Luna was different. Or maybe I was different. I'd learned that the bond between handler and dog isn't built through dominance or strict discipline. It's built through thousands of small moments of understanding. It's built through play and rest and shared meals. It's built through failing together and trying again. When Luna found Emma that morning, pressed against that tree in the ravine, she didn't just alert and sit like the textbook says. She approached slowly, gently, her tail low, and her body relaxed. She knew instinctively that this person was fragile, scared. She pressed her warm body against Emma's side without any command from me, offering comfort before I even assessed the situation. That's the bond. That's what 4 years of partnership looks like. As we waited for the rescue team, I watched Luna carefully monitoring Emma, occasionally looking back at me as if to say, "She's okay, right? We got her in time?" In that moment, I felt a surge of love for this dog that nearly brought me to tears. She'd run through thorns and mud, scrambled down a dangerous ravine, worked through difficult conditions without hesitation, all because she trusted me when I said, "Seek." People always ask if I worry about Luna getting hurt on a rescue. The answer is yes, constantly. Every time we go into the field, I'm aware that I'm asking this animal I love to put herself in danger. But I also know that Luna was born for this work. I've seen her on her days off, restless and bored, waiting for the next call. This isn't just training for her. It's purpose. Emma reached out with a shaking hand and touched Luna's head. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "How did she find me?" "She's trained to follow human scent," I explained. But even as I said it, I knew it was more than that. Luna had worked through challenging terrain, competing scents, and difficult weather. because we work as one. When I'm stressed, she stays calm. When she's uncertain, I guide her. We balance each other. There's a moment in every search when everything else falls away. When it's just me, Luna, and the work. When I stop thinking and start feeling, trusting her nose and her instincts completely. That's when we're at our best. That's when we find people. As the rescue team finally reached us and began preparing Emma for transport, Luna stayed close, her eyes never leaving the bride. One of the paramedics smiled and said, "That's one special dog you've got there." I looked down at Luna, her fur matted with mud, a small cut on her leg from the thorns, her tongue hanging out as she panted from exertion. "Yeah," I said softly, my hand resting on her head. "She really is." The bond between handler and dog isn't something you can explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's built in the quiet moments and the desperate ones. It's trust made tangible. And that morning, in that ravine, with a lost bride and a search dog who refused to give up, I felt grateful for every early morning, every training session, every moment that built the partnership that saved a life. Luna looked up at me, and I swear she smiled. "Good girl," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Let's go home." The rescue team had Emma on a stretcher, wrapped in thermal blankets, an IV already running fluids into her arm. The paramedics were efficient and kind, asking her questions to assess her cognitive function, checking her vitals every few minutes. I stood back, giving them space to work, Luna sitting calmly at my side. My part was done. We'd found her, and now the medical professionals would take over. That's when one of the wedding coordinators came crashing through the brush, nearly tripping over a root in her designer heels. She was breathing hard, her phone clutched in one hand like a lifeline. Behind her, I could see two men in expensive suits trying to navigate the ravine with considerably less grace. "Oh, thank God!" the coordinator gasped, her eyes landing on Emma. Then she turned to me, and her expression shifted into something I'd seen before, but never quite gotten used to. Assessment. Calculation. She was sizing me up, trying to figure out who I was and whether I mattered. "You found her," she said, stating the obvious. "Ms. Hartwell's father will want to thank you personally. He's waiting at the estate. He'll want to arrange proper compensation for your—" "I'm just doing my job, ma'am," I interrupted quietly, uncomfortable with where this was heading. "No thanks necessary." The coordinator blinked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. One of the suited men had reached us now, and he pulled out a business card. "Officer, we really must insist. The Hartwell family is very grateful. Perhaps we could discuss—" "There's nothing to discuss," I said, more firmly this time. I glanced at Emma on the stretcher, and our eyes met. She looked embarrassed, almost apologetic, and something passed between us in that moment. An understanding. Here's what I've learned in 7 years of doing this work. People are people. It doesn't matter if they're wearing a torn wedding dress that probably cost more than my car, or if they're wearing clothes from a thrift store. When someone is lost, scared, and hurt, all the money in the world doesn't matter. They're just human. Vulnerable. Equal. I didn't know Emma was a billionaire. I didn't know her last name was Hartwell. Didn't recognize it even when I heard it. I grew up in a small town where wealth meant having a second car and maybe a boat. The world of private estates and personal assistants and wedding coordinators might as well have been another planet. But even if I had known, it wouldn't have changed anything. That's not why I do this work. Luna and I have pulled people out of wrecked cars, found lost children in state parks, located elderly folks with dementia who wandered from nursing homes. We've searched for homeless veterans and teenagers who ran away, and hikers who thought they were prepared but weren't. Every single one of them mattered. Every single one of them deserved our best effort. The coordinator was still talking, something about press coverage and recognition ceremonies, but I'd stopped listening. I was watching Emma being carefully carried up the ravine, watching the way the morning light filtered through the trees, feeling the weight of Luna's head against my leg as she leaned into me, tired but content. "Ma'am," I said, cutting through the coordinator's monologue. "With all respect, I need to get my dog checked for injuries and file my report. If Miss Hartwell wants to reach out later, she can contact the department. But right now, we're done here." I turned to leave, and Emma called out weakly from the stretcher. "Wait!" The paramedics paused. "Officer Sarah?" I walked over to her, Luna following faithfully at my heel. Emma's eyes were filled with tears, and she reached out a hand. I took it, and her grip was surprisingly strong. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for the rescue. I mean, yes, for that too. But thank you for treating me like a person. Just a person." I squeezed her hand gently. "That's all any of us are," I said simply. As Luna and I hiked back through the forest toward our vehicle, I felt a deep sense of peace. The fog was lifting, morning sun breaking through the canopy in golden shafts. My uniform was filthy, my body ached, and I had a mountain of paperwork waiting for me. But we'd done what we set out to do. We'd brought someone home. That's the job. That's always been the job. Whether you're rescuing a billionaire or a broke college student or anyone in between, the mission is the same. Find them. Bring them home safely. Treat them with dignity and care. The badge on my chest isn't about recognition or reward, it's about service. And service doesn't discriminate based on bank accounts. Luna looked up at me as we walked, and I smiled down at her. "Just another day's work, girl," I said softly. She wagged her tail, and we headed home. 3 weeks passed before I heard from Emma again. 3 weeks of routine calls, training sessions with Luna, and paperwork that never seemed to end. I'd nearly forgotten about the lost bride in the woods, filed away in my memory alongside dozens of other rescues. That's how I cope with this job. You can't carry every story with you, or the weight becomes too much. Then one afternoon, my supervisor called me into his office. He had a strange expression on his face, somewhere between amused and bewildered. "Sarah, you've got a visitor," he said. "A very insistent visitor who won't take no for an answer." I found Emma waiting in the lobby, and I barely recognized her. Gone was the muddy, torn wedding dress, the tangled hair, the terrified expression. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, minimal makeup. She looked younger somehow, more real. But her eyes, those I recognized. The same eyes that had looked up at me with such desperation and gratitude. "Hi," she said, standing up quickly, nervously clutching a folder. "I hope it's okay that I came. I tried calling, but they said you were in the field and I needed to see you." We sat in the small conference room, Luna resting at my feet. Emma kept glancing at the dog, a soft smile crossing her face each time. She slid the folder across the table to me. "I want to make a donation," she said, "to the K9 unit. New equipment, training facilities, whatever you need. And there's a check in there for you personally for—" "Emma," I interrupted gently, pushing the folder back toward her without opening it. "I can't accept that." Her face fell. "But I want to thank you properly. You saved my life. Luna saved my life. That morning, I was hypothermic, injured. And if you hadn't found me when you did—" Her voice cracked slightly. "Money is the one thing I have plenty of. Please, Let me do something meaningful with it. I understood then. This wasn't about paying me off or clearing some debt she felt she owed. This was about her trying to make sense of what happened, trying to transform a terrifying experience into something purposeful. The department can accept donations, I said carefully. If you want to contribute to the K-9 unit, talk to my supervisor. Better equipment, better training facilities. That helps everyone, and I won't stop you from doing that. But I can't take personal compensation. It's against policy. And more than that, it's not why I did it. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Then what can I do? How can I possibly thank you? I thought about it for a moment, watching Luna sleep peacefully at my feet, thinking about all the rescues that don't end well, all the families who never get closure, all the handlers who struggle with inadequate resources. Live, I said finally. Live your life fully. Don't let that day define you or haunt you. You got a second chance. Use it. Be kind to people. Maybe volunteer somewhere. Help others who are struggling. That's worth more than any check you could write me. Emma wiped at her eyes, laughing softly. That's the most expensive free advice I've ever gotten, she said. Then her expression grew serious. Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone else? I nodded. I wasn't just lost that morning, she said quietly. I was running. From the wedding. From my life. From expectations I never asked for. Everyone always wants something from me. My money, my connections, my name. Every relationship I've had, every friendship. I've wondered if they'd still be there if I had nothing. And that morning, standing at the altar, about to marry someone I wasn't sure truly loved me, or just loved what I represented, I panicked. I ran into those woods and kept running until I was completely lost. She looked at me with raw honesty. You're the first person in years who looked at me and just saw someone who needed help. Not Emma Hartwell, billionaire heiress, just Emma, a scared woman in the woods. And when you found me, you didn't change. You didn't ask for anything. You just wrapped your jacket around me and told me I was safe. My throat tightened. Did you go through with it? The wedding? She shook her head. No. I called it off. My family was furious. My father didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. The tabloids had a field day. But you know what? I don't regret it. That day in the woods, thinking I might actually die there, it clarified everything. Life's too short to live it for other people. We talked for another hour, not about money or gratitude, but about life, about purpose, about what matters. She told me she'd started volunteering at a women's shelter, using her resources to help people escape dangerous situations. She'd enrolled in college courses, something she'd always wanted to do but never had time for. She was building a life that felt authentic, not just expected. When she finally left, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for finding me, but for showing me what real service looks like. What it means to help people without expecting anything in return." After she was gone, my supervisor came in holding the folder she'd left behind. She made a donation to the K-9 unit, he said, his voice slightly awed. $200,000, new training equipment, facility upgrades, funding for 3 more K-9 teams. I felt Luna stir at my feet, and I reached down to scratch her ears. "That's good," I said quietly. "A lot of people will benefit from that." "Sarah," my supervisor said, shaking his head in disbelief, "do you realize who that was? Her family owns—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "But it doesn't matter. She was just someone who needed help. And we helped her. That's all." He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "You're either the most principled person I've ever met, or completely crazy." "Maybe both," I said, smiling back. That evening, as Luna and I drove home, I thought about gratitude and what it really means. Emma's donation would help countless people, would save lives, would give other handlers and their dogs the tools they needed to do this work well. That mattered. That was meaningful. But what mattered more was the conversation we'd had. Two women from completely different worlds, connected by a moment of crisis that stripped away everything superficial and left only what was real. She thanked me by choosing to live differently, to use her resources to help others, to see people as people. And somehow, that felt like enough. Emma's wedding day had started at dawn, 6 hours before Luna and I ever got the call. I didn't learn the full story until much later, when Emma and I had become something close to friends, sitting in a quiet coffee shop where nobody recognized her and she could just be herself for a while. "I woke up in the bridal suite at 5 in the morning," she told me, staring into her cup like she could see that day reflected in the coffee. "Couldn't sleep. Everyone kept telling me it was just nerves, that every bride feels this way. But it wasn't nerves. It was dread." She'd been engaged to Marcus for 14 months. He was perfect on paper. Harvard-educated, came from old money, knew all the right people, said all the right things. Their families had been thrilled, already planning business mergers and social connections before the engagement ring was even sized. The wedding had been in the works for a year, every detail orchestrated by the best planners money could buy. "There were 300 guests," Emma said softly. 300 people coming to watch me promise forever to someone I wasn't sure I even knew. We'd been so busy with wedding planning, with appearances, with expectations, that we'd stopped actually talking months ago. Every conversation was about seating charts, or which photographer to hire, or what our first dance song should be. The morning had been a blur of hair and makeup, champagne she didn't drink, bridesmaids fussing over her dress. A custom creation that had taken 8 months to make and cost more than most people's houses. Her mother kept crying happy tears. Her father kept checking his watch, making sure everything stayed on schedule. Everyone was so excited, so happy for her. And Emma felt like she was drowning. "The estate has these beautiful gardens," she continued. "Miles of walking paths through old-growth forest. I'd explored them during the planning visits, and there was this one trail that led to the most peaceful spot I'd ever seen. A clearing with a stream, completely secluded. I'd go there sometimes just to breathe, to escape all the noise." 2 hours before the ceremony, while her bridesmaids were getting dressed and the photographer was setting up shots, Emma told everyone she needed a moment alone. Just 10 minutes to center herself, to pray, to prepare. They understood. They gave her space. She walked out of the bridal suite in her full wedding dress, veil and all, and instead of going to the small chapel on the estate grounds, she walked toward the forest trail. Just for a few minutes, she told herself. Just to clear her head. "I got to that clearing," Emma said, her voice breaking slightly, "and I just stood there by the stream, watching the water. And I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding for months. Do you love him? Really love him? The kind of love that weathers storms and builds a life together?" The answer had been immediate and devastating. "No." "I started crying," she admitted. "Full sobbing, the kind where you can't catch your breath. And I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk down that aisle and lie to everyone, especially to myself. But I also couldn't face going back. Couldn't face my parents, my bridesmaids, Marcus, all those guests. The shame, the disappointment, the scandal. So she'd kept walking, deeper into the forest, away from the estate, away from the life that felt like a beautiful cage. She wasn't thinking clearly, wasn't paying attention to where she was going. The trails all looked the same. The wedding dress kept catching on branches, tearing, getting heavier with each step. Her elaborate heels, ridiculous for hiking, twisted on a root, and she felt her ankle give way. "I fell hard," Emma said, "tumbled down into that ravine. My veil got caught in the branches above me, and I couldn't get up. My ankle was screaming, my dress was ruined, and I was completely, utterly lost. And the worst part? I deserved it. I'd run away like a coward instead of facing everyone." She'd tried calling for help, but her phone had fallen out of the small clutch she'd been carrying, lost somewhere in the fall. She could hear sounds in the distance, voices calling her name, people searching, but she couldn't tell which direction they were coming from. Every time she tried to stand, the pain in her ankle made her vision blur. Hours passed. The fog rolled in. The temperature dropped. Emma had started shaking uncontrollably, her wet dress clinging to her skin, hypothermia beginning its dangerous work. She'd curled up against that tree, the white fabric of her dress the only bright thing in the gray forest, and wondered if this was how her story would end, if they'd find her too late, if her last act would be this terrible, selfish mistake. "I kept thinking about my father having to identify my body," Emma whispered, "about Marcus waiting at the altar, not knowing if I'd abandoned him or if something terrible had happened, about my mother losing her daughter on what should have been the happiest day. The guilt was almost worse than the cold." That's when she'd heard Luna's bark. That's when she'd heard my voice calling out. That's when she'd realized she was getting a second chance. "When you found me," Emma said, looking at me with those honest eyes, "the first thing I felt wasn't relief. It was shame. I'd caused all this chaos, all this pain because I was too afraid to speak up. But you didn't judge me. You just wrapped your jacket around me and told me I was safe. You treated the situation like what it was, an emergency that needed handling, not some scandalous drama." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You were lost and hurt. That's all that mattered in that moment." "I've learned something since that day," Emma said. "Running away doesn't solve anything, but neither does staying in a situation that's slowly killing your soul just because other people expect it. The brave thing isn't avoiding difficult conversations. The brave thing is having them, even when it costs you everything." She'd faced her family that afternoon, still in her ruined dress, and called off the wedding. It had been brutal. Her father had threatened to cut her off. Marcus had oscillated between devastated and furious. The guests had scattered in confused clusters, gossiping and speculating. The tabloids had run stories for weeks, but Emma had survived it. More than that, she'd started actually living. "That crisis on my wedding day," she said, finishing her coffee, "was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to stop running and start choosing. And every day since, I've been choosing differently. Choosing honesty over appearances. Choosing authenticity over expectations. Choosing life over the fear of living it." As we left the coffee shop, walking past people who had no idea they were passing a billionaire in jeans and a sweater, I thought about how strange life is. How sometimes our worst moments become our most transforming ones. How getting lost is sometimes the only way to find yourself. And how grateful I was that Luna and I had been there that morning to make sure Emma got the chance to discover that truth. Most people don't know we exist until they need us. K-9 search and rescue teams work in the shadows, training constantly for emergencies that might never come, or might come tomorrow. We don't get parades or recognition ceremonies. We don't make the news unless something goes terribly wrong or miraculously right. We're the quiet professionals who show up when someone's world is falling apart. Luna and I train 4 days a week, minimum. People see the successful rescues and think it's instinct, think it's simple. But behind every find are thousands of hours of practice. We train in rain, in snow, in summer heat that makes the asphalt too hot for human feet. We train in abandoned buildings and dense forests and urban environments. We train until Luna's responses are automatic, until I can read her body language in pitch darkness, until we move together like one organism with a single purpose. The morning we found Emma, Luna was operating at the peak of her abilities. But that peak didn't happen by accident. It happened because we'd spent years preparing for exactly that scenario. Scent tracking in difficult terrain, working through distractions and competing smells, maintaining focus when conditions are less than ideal. Every training session, every certification test, every drill we'd ever run, it all came together in those crucial hours. But here's what most people don't understand. For every success story like Emma's, there are dozens of searches that end differently. Searches where we find someone too late, where we spend days looking and never find them at all, where despite our best efforts and Luna's incredible nose, the forest keeps its secrets. I think about Tommy Chen sometimes, a 6-year-old who wandered away from a family campsite 2 summers ago. Luna and I searched for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, covering miles of wilderness. We found his jacket, his shoe, signs that he'd been moving in circles, getting more and more lost. But we never found Tommy. Another team discovered his body 5 days later, miles from where we'd been searching. Too far for a small child to have walked? To this day, I don't understand how he got there. Those are the cases that haunt you. The ones where you did everything right, where your dog worked perfectly, and it still wasn't enough. I've seen handlers quit after cases like that, unable to carry the weight of those losses. I've thought about quitting myself late at night when the failures pile up in my mind and the successes feel too few and far between. But then I think about the alternative. If Luna and I weren't out there, who would be? If trained K9 teams didn't exist, how many more people would die lost in the wilderness, in collapsed buildings, in disaster zones? Our work matters precisely because it's hard, because the stakes are life and death, because someone has to be willing to show up. The public sees police dogs doing bite work and drug detection, and they think that's all we do. They don't know about the wilderness air scent dogs like Luna, trained to detect human scent carried on the wind. They don't know about cadaver dogs who can locate remains underwater or buried deep underground. They don't know about urban disaster dogs who climb through unstable rubble after earthquakes and building collapses. Each specialty requires years of training. Each dog is carefully selected for temperament, drive, and ability. And each handler sacrifices a normal life for this work. We're on call 24/7. We miss holidays, birthdays, important events, because somewhere, someone is missing, and time is critical. Our personal lives suffer. Our families learn to understand that the phone might ring at any moment, and we'll be gone for days. After Emma's rescue made the news, despite my best efforts to avoid media attention, I got dozens of messages from people I'd never met. Some were kind, congratulating us on the save, but others were painful. People whose loved ones were never found, asking why we couldn't find their daughter, their husband, their father. As if we hadn't tried. As if we hadn't given everything we had. There's no good answer to those questions. Search and rescue is part science, part art, and part luck. Scent is affected by weather, terrain, time elapsed, and 100 other variables. A person can be 50 feet away and completely undetectable under the wrong conditions. We do our best, but our best isn't always enough. That's the burden unsung heroes carry. We're celebrated when we succeed and questioned when we fail, even though both outcomes often involve the same level of skill, dedication, and effort. The difference is factors beyond our control. How long someone was missing before we were called, whether they stayed in one place or kept moving, whether the weather cooperated or worked against us. Luna doesn't understand failure the way I do. When we don't find someone, she knows I'm sad, but she doesn't carry guilt. That's a uniquely human burden. She just shows up the next day, ready to search again, ready to try. Sometimes I think she's wiser than I am. The K-9 unit in our county has 6 teams total. 6 teams to cover hundreds of square miles of varied terrain. We're all volunteers or regular officers who've taken on search and rescue as an additional duty. Emma's donation is funding 3 more teams, which will literally save lives. But even with 9 teams, we'll still be stretched thin. The need is always greater than the resources. I wish people understood what it takes to do this work. The physical toll: I've torn ligaments, broken bones, gotten hypothermia, and accumulated scars from thorns and broken glass and sharp metal. The emotional toll: carrying the faces of people we couldn't save, bearing witness to family grief, processing trauma while maintaining the ability to function on the next call. The financial toll: specialized equipment, veterinary care, training certifications, all often coming out of our own pockets. We do it anyway. We show up anyway. Because somebody has to. After Emma's rescue, a local reporter asked me what I wanted people to know about K-9 search and rescue. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about Tommy Chen and the dozen other names I carry with me. I thought about Emma, shivering in that ravine. I thought about Luna, curled up at my feet every night, always ready for the next call. I want people to know that we're here, I said finally. In your worst moment, when someone you love is missing, and you're terrified and don't know what to do, there are people and dogs who've trained their whole lives for that exact moment. We'll come running. We'll search until we can't search anymore. We might not always succeed, but we'll never stop trying. That's what it means to be an unsung hero. Not that we're somehow better or more virtuous than anyone else, but that we've chosen a path where success is expected and failure is personal, where the work is hard and the recognition is rare, where you keep showing up despite knowing that heartbreak is inevitable. Luna stirred at my feet as I finished talking to the reporter, and I looked down at her. She was getting older now, gray starting to show around her muzzle. We had maybe 2 more good years of fieldwork together before retirement. 2 more years of searches, of rescues, of trying to bring people home. "Ready to go back to work, girl?" I asked her. Her tail wagged, and she stood up, always ready, always willing. That's what unsung heroes look like. Not perfect, not invincible, just present, just trying, just showing up day after day, because the work matters and someone has to do it. And as long as Luna and I could still search, we would. That was our promise to people like Emma, like Tommy, like everyone who'd ever been lost. We'd keep looking. We'd keep trying. We'd keep showing up. That's all we could do. And sometimes, miraculously, it was enough. Most people don't know we exist until they need us. K-9 search and rescue teams work in the shadows, training constantly for emergencies that might never come. or might come tomorrow. We don't get parades or recognition ceremonies. We don't make the news unless something goes terribly wrong or miraculously right. We're the quiet professionals who show up when someone's world is falling apart. Luna and I train 4 days a week, minimum. People see the successful rescues and think it's instinct, think it's simple. But behind every find are thousands of hours of practice. We train in rain, in snow, in summer heat that makes the asphalt too hot for human feet. We train in abandoned buildings and dense forests and urban environments. We train until Luna's responses are automatic, until I can read her body language in pitch darkness, until we move together like one organism with a single purpose. The morning we found Emma, Luna was operating at the peak of her abilities, but that peak didn't happen by accident. It happened because we'd spent years preparing for exactly that scenario. Scent tracking in difficult terrain, working through distractions and competing smells, maintaining focus when conditions are less than ideal. Every training session, every certification test, every drill we'd ever run, it all came together in those crucial hours. But here's what most people don't understand. For every success story like Emma's, there are dozens of searches that end differently. Searches where we find someone too late, where we spend days looking and never find them at all, where despite our best efforts and Luna's incredible nose, the forest keeps its secrets. I think about Tommy Chen sometimes, a 6-year-old who wandered away from a family campsite 2 summers ago. Luna and I searched for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, covering miles of wilderness. We found his jacket, his shoe, signs that he'd been moving in circles, getting more and more lost. But we never found Tommy. Another team discovered his body 5 days later, miles from where we'd been searching. Too far for a small child to have walked? To this day, I don't understand how he got there. Those are the cases that haunt you. The ones where you did everything right, where your dog worked perfectly, and it still wasn't enough. I've seen handlers quit after cases like that, unable to carry the weight of those losses. I've thought about quitting myself late at night when the failures pile up in my mind and the successes feel too few and far between. But then I think about the alternative. If Luna and I weren't out there, who would be? If trained K9 teams didn't exist, how many more people would die lost in the wilderness, in collapsed buildings, in disaster zones? Our work matters precisely because it's hard, because the stakes are life and death, because someone has to be willing to show up. The public sees police dogs doing bite work and drug detection, and they think that's all we do. They don't know about the wilderness air scent dogs like Luna, trained to detect human scent carried on the wind. They don't know about cadaver dogs who can locate remains underwater or buried deep underground. They don't know about urban disaster dogs who climb through unstable rubble after earthquakes and building collapses. Each specialty requires years of training. Each dog is carefully selected for temperament, drive, and ability. And each handler sacrifices a normal life for this work. We're on call 24/7. We miss holidays, birthdays, important events, because somewhere, someone is missing, and time is critical. Our personal lives suffer. Our families learn to understand that the phone might ring at any moment, and we'll be gone for days. After Emma's rescue made the news, despite my best efforts to avoid media attention, I got dozens of messages from people I'd never met. Some were kind, congratulating us on the save, but others were painful. People whose loved ones were never found, asking why we couldn't find their daughter, their husband, their father. As if we hadn't tried. As if we hadn't given everything we had. There's no good answer to those questions. Search and rescue is part science, part art, and part luck. Scent is affected by weather, terrain, time elapsed, and 100 other variables. A person can be 50 feet away and completely undetectable under the wrong conditions. We do our best, but our best isn't always enough. That's the burden unsung heroes carry. We're celebrated when we succeed and questioned when we fail, even though both outcomes often involve the same level of skill, dedication, and effort. The difference is factors beyond our control. How long someone was missing before we were called, whether they stayed in one place or kept moving, whether the weather cooperated or worked against us. Luna doesn't understand failure the way I do. When we don't find someone, she knows I'm sad, but she doesn't carry guilt. That's a uniquely human burden. She just shows up the next day, ready to search again, ready to try. Sometimes I think she's wiser than I am. The K-9 unit in our county has 6 teams total. 6 teams to cover hundreds of square miles of varied terrain. We're all volunteers or regular officers who've taken on search and rescue as an additional duty. Emma's donation is funding 3 more teams, which will literally save lives. But even with 9 teams, we'll still be stretched thin. The need is always greater than the resources. I wish people understood what it takes to do this work. The physical toll: I've torn ligaments, broken bones, gotten hypothermia, and accumulated scars from thorns and broken glass and sharp metal. The emotional toll: carrying the faces of people we couldn't save, bearing witness to family grief, processing trauma while maintaining the ability to function on the next call. The financial toll: specialized equipment, veterinary care, training certifications, all often coming out of our own pockets. We do it anyway. We show up anyway. Because somebody has to. After Emma's rescue, a local reporter asked me what I wanted people to know about K-9 search and rescue. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about Tommy Chen and the dozen other names I carry with me. I thought about Emma, shivering in that ravine. I thought about Luna, curled up at my feet every night, always ready for the next call. I want people to know that we're here, I said finally. In your worst moment, when someone you love is missing, and you're terrified and don't know what to do, there are people and dogs who've trained their whole lives for that exact moment. We'll come running. We'll search until we can't search anymore. We might not always succeed, but we'll never stop trying. That's what it means to be an unsung hero. Not that we're somehow better or more virtuous than anyone else, but that we've chosen a path where success is expected and failure is personal, where the work is hard and the recognition is rare, where you keep showing up despite knowing that heartbreak is inevitable. Luna stirred at my feet as I finished talking to the reporter, and I looked down at her. She was getting older now, gray starting to show around her muzzle. We had maybe 2 more good years of fieldwork together before retirement. 2 more years of searches, of rescues, of trying to bring people home. Ready to go back to work, girl? I asked her. Her tail wagged, and she stood up, always ready, always willing. That's what unsung heroes look like. Not perfect, not invincible, just present, just trying, just showing up, day after day. Because the work matters and someone has to do it. And as long as Luna and I could still search, we would. That was our promise to people like Emma, like Tommy, like everyone who'd ever been lost. We'd keep looking. We'd keep trying. We'd keep showing up. That's all we could do. And sometimes, miraculously, it was enough. 6 months after the rescue, Emma called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was cleaning Luna's kennel. "I'm in town," she said, her voice bright in a way I'd never heard before. "Can we meet for coffee? There's someone I want you to meet." I almost said no. We'd kept in touch sporadically, a text here, an occasional phone call there, but I was still cautious about our friendship. Our worlds were so different, and I worried that eventually she'd realize we had nothing in common beyond one traumatic morning in the woods. But something in her voice made me curious. She was waiting at the same coffee shop where we'd talked before, but she wasn't alone. A woman sat across from her, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. Emma stood up when she saw me, practically bouncing with excitement. "Sarah, this is Nicole," she said. "Nicole, this is Sarah, the woman I've been telling you about." Nicole extended her hand warmly. "The legendary K9 handler," she said with a grin. "Emma hasn't stopped talking about you." We settled into conversation, and I learned that Nicole ran the women's shelter where Emma had been volunteering. They'd met 3 months ago, and the way Emma looked at her when she talked, there was something there, something real and unguarded that I'd never seen in her before. "Nicole's teaching me that helping people isn't about writing checks," Emma said softly. "It's about showing up, being present, actually doing the work." "She's a natural," Nicole added. "Last week, she sat with a woman for 6 hours, just listening while she processed leaving an abusive situation. Didn't try to fix anything, didn't throw money at the problem, just listened." I saw Emma blush, saw her duck her head with genuine humility, and I realized something had fundamentally shifted in her. The woman sitting across from me wasn't performing or trying to impress anyone. She was just being herself, comfortable in her own skin in a way she hadn't been that first day we met. Over the following months, our friendship deepened in unexpected ways. Emma started joining me for Luna's training sessions, hauling equipment and setting up scent trails without complaint. She'd show up in old jeans and hiking boots, her hair in a messy ponytail, laughing when she tripped over roots or got muddy. "I never got to do this kind of thing growing up," she told me once, scratching Luna behind the ears after a successful training run. "Everything was private tutors and etiquette lessons and charity galas. I never learned how to just be outside, getting dirty, doing physical work. It's liberating." She introduced me to Nicole properly a few weeks later, and I watched their relationship unfold with a kind of wonder. Nicole didn't care about Emma's money or her family name. She challenged Emma, called her out when she slipped into old patterns of using wealth to solve problems that required personal effort. And Emma, for her first time perhaps in her life, had found someone who loved her for who she was becoming, not who she was supposed to be. "My father still isn't speaking to me," Emma confided one evening. We were sitting on my apartment steps, Luna sprawled between us, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "Not because I called off the wedding, he's gotten over that, but because of Nicole. Because I'm finally living authentically, and that life doesn't match his vision for the Hartwell legacy." "I'm sorry," I said quietly. She shook her head. "Don't be. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what matters to me. I'm choosing love over appearances. I'm choosing people who see me, really see me, over people who see my bank account. And I learned that from you." "From me?" I was genuinely confused. "That morning in the woods," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. "You could have treated me differently once you realized who I was. You could have changed your behavior, become deferential, or asked for favors, or looked at me like a meal ticket. But you didn't. You just kept being exactly who you were. And that taught me that real relationships, real friendships, are built on authenticity, not performance." I felt my own throat tighten. "You taught me something too," I admitted. "I'd gotten cynical, I think. So focused on the job, on the mission, that I'd forgotten why I started doing this work in the first place. You reminded me that every person we find has a whole life ahead of them, that the rescue is just the beginning of their story, not the end. Luna lifted her head and looked between us, her tail thumping softly against the concrete. Emma laughed through her tears and buried her face in Luna's fur. Our friendship became something neither of us expected, but both of us needed. Emma brought Nicole to one of our training sessions, and Nicole ended up adopting a retired search dog who needed a home. The four of us, me, Emma, Nicole, and our dogs, started hiking together on weekends, exploring the same forests where Emma had once been lost. "It's different now," Emma said during one of those hikes, standing in a clearing that might have been near where we found her. "These woods used to represent panic and fear. Now they represent freedom and friendship and second chances." She'd started taking online courses in social work, using her resources to fund programs at Nicole's shelter, while also learning how to do the actual work of helping people in crisis. She was building a life that had nothing to do with her family's expectations and everything to do with her own values. One afternoon, she showed up at my door unannounced, her eyes red from crying. I pulled her inside without questions, made tea, and waited. Luna immediately pressed against Emma's legs, offering the same comfort she'd given that morning in the ravine. "Nicole and I are getting married," Emma said finally, and my heart leapt until I saw her expression. "But my family says, if I go through with it, I'm out, completely cut off. No inheritance, no trust fund, no family name. My father gave me an ultimatum: Nicole or the Hartwell fortune. I can't have both." "Shush! What are you going to do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I could see it in her eyes. "I'm choosing Nicole," Emma said firmly. "I'm choosing love and authenticity, and a life that's actually mine. The money never made me happy anyway. It just made me a prisoner to other people's expectations." She looked at me with determination and fear mixed together. "But Sarah, I'm terrified. I've never had to actually work for money, never had to budget or worry about rent or any of the things normal people deal with. What if I can't do it? What if I've been so sheltered that I can't survive in the real world?" I took her hands in mine. "Then you learn. You fall down and you get back up. You ask for help when you need it. You do what everyone else does. You figure it out. And you won't be alone. You'll have Nicole, and you'll have me, and you'll have all the people who actually love you for who you are." Emma's wedding to Nicole 6 months later was nothing like the elaborate affair that had been planned with Marcus. It was in a small community garden, with maybe 30 people present, mostly friends from the shelter, a few of my colleagues from the K-9 unit, and some of Nicole's family. Emma wore a simple dress she'd bought off the rack. There were folding chairs and homemade decorations and potluck food. It was the most beautiful wedding I'd ever attended. I stood up during the reception and gave a toast that surprised even me. 6 months ago, I thought Emma and I had nothing in common. She came from a world I couldn't even imagine, and I come from a world she'd never experienced. But I've learned that real friendship isn't about where you start. It's about where you're willing to go together. It's about showing up for each other, being honest with each other, and choosing each other even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. I looked at Emma, who was crying openly, Nicole's arm around her waist. "Emma, you've taught me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and choosing authentically anyway. Thank you for trusting me with your friendship. Thank you for showing me that people can change, can grow, can build entirely new lives based on what matters most." Later that night, As Emma and Nicole danced under string lights while Luna slept at my feet, I thought about the strange path that had brought us all together. A panicked bride running into the woods, a search dog following a scent, a handler doing her job, and somehow, impossibly, a friendship that transcended every boundary and expectation. Emma caught my eye from the dance floor and smiled. Not the polished, practiced smile of a socialite, but the genuine, radiant smile of someone who'd found their way home. I smiled back, raising my glass in a silent toast. To unlikely friendships, to second chances, to having the courage to get lost so you can discover who you really are, and to the morning in the woods that changed everything. The anniversary of Emma's rescue fell on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Luna and I had found her in that ravine. I woke up thinking about that day, about how close we'd come to a different ending, about all the small decisions and moments of luck that had aligned to bring her home safely. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Meet me at the trailhead? I want to go back." I understood immediately. She needed to return to that place, to face it with clear eyes and a steady heart, to reclaim those woods as something other than the site of her terror. I texted back, "Luna and I will be there in an hour." We met at the Riverside Estate entrance. Emma was staying in a small apartment in town now, working full-time at the shelter and taking night classes, living on a budget she'd never imagined. Nicole was there too, holding Emma's hand, and I could see both support and concern in her expression. "You don't have to do this," Nicole said softly. "I do," Emma replied. "I need to walk back through it. Not as someone running away, but as someone choosing to remember." The four of us, me, Emma, Nicole, and Luna, started down the trail together. Emma had a map this time, proper hiking boots, a backpack with water, and emergency supplies. She was prepared in ways she hadn't been a year ago, but I could feel the tension radiating from her as we got deeper into the forest. We reached the clearing where Emma had first panicked, where she'd stood by the stream and asked herself that devastating question about love and truth. She stopped there, breathing deeply, and I watched her close her eyes and just feel the moment. "This is where it started," she said quietly. "Where I finally admitted to myself that I couldn't go through with it. I was so scared. Not of the woods, but of disappointing everyone. Of failing at something that was supposed to be perfect." Nicole squeezed her hand. "You didn't fail. You were brave." We continued on, following the path Emma had taken in her blind panic a year ago. She pointed out places she remembered. The log where she'd tripped, the steep section where her dress had caught on thorns, the moment when she'd realized she was completely lost. When we reached the ravine, Emma stopped. I could see her breathing accelerate, see the memories washing over her. Luna, sensing the shift in energy, moved closer to Emma and pressed against her leg. The same instinctive comfort she'd offered a year ago. "Down there," Emma whispered, pointing to the spot where she'd fallen, where she'd spent hours cold and hurt and terrified. "That's where I thought I was going to die." We carefully made our way down the embankment together, and Emma stood in the exact spot where I'd found her. The white ribbons from the wedding decorations were long gone, but I could picture it perfectly. Emma in her torn dress, her veil caught in the branches, her eyes filled with desperation and relief when she'd seen me. Emma knelt down and placed her hand on the ground, as if connecting with that version of herself. "I want to tell her something," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "The woman who was here a year ago, so lost and broken. I want to tell her that she survives this, that the shame and fear and guilt don't last forever. that losing everything she thought mattered helps her discover what actually does. Tears were streaming down her face now. I want to tell her that the canine handler who finds her becomes one of her closest friends, that she meets a woman who loves her for exactly who she is, that she discovers a purpose that has nothing to do with money or family expectations, that getting lost in these woods is the beginning of finding herself. Nicole was crying too, and I felt my own eyes burning. Luna sat perfectly still, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Emma stood up and looked at me. "Sarah, I've never properly thanked you for what you taught me that day." "You already have," I started, but she shook her head. "No, not for the rescue. For the lesson that came after. You showed me what it means to see people as people, to serve without expectation, to show up regardless of who someone is or what they can offer you. That lesson changed my entire life. It changed how I understand relationships, how I approach my work, how I measure success and meaning." She took a shaky breath. "Before that day, I thought my value came from my family name, my wealth, my ability to meet other people's expectations. I thought love meant performing perfectly for an audience. I thought helping people meant writing checks from a distance. I was so empty inside, Sarah, so lost, even before I ever walked into these woods." Emma looked around at the forest, at the ravine that had nearly been her grave. "But that morning, when I was at my absolute lowest, cold, hurt, terrified, having destroyed my own wedding and disappointed everyone who mattered, you showed up and treated me with dignity. You didn't judge me. You didn't lecture me. You just wrapped your jacket around me and told me I was safe. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. It was so simple and so profound." She turned back to me, her eyes clear and honest. "You taught me that real love, real friendship, real purpose, it's all about showing up authentically, being present, doing the work. Not because there's something in it for you, but because it's the right thing to do. Because we're all just humans stumbling through this life, and sometimes we need each other." I didn't know what to say. I'd just been doing my job that day, following my training, being who I'd always been. But I was learning that sometimes the most ordinary acts have extraordinary ripples we never see. "You've taught me something too," I said finally. "I've spent years doing this work, and I've saved people, and I've lost people, and somewhere along the way, I started protecting myself by not thinking too much about what happened after. I'd find someone, bring them home, and then move on to the next call. I didn't let myself wonder about their lives, their stories, their futures. I looked at Emma, this woman who'd become my friend, who'd rebuilt her entire existence from the ground up, who'd chosen authenticity over comfort. But you've shown me that every rescue matters, not just in that moment, but in all the moments that come after. You've shown me that the work I do has meaning beyond the immediate crisis. That sometimes saving someone's life gives them the chance to really start living. That matters to me more than I can say." Luna barked once as if agreeing, and we all laughed through our tears. The sound echoed through the ravine, so different from the desperate cries that had filled this space a year ago. We climbed back up together, helping each other over the difficult sections, working as a team. When we reached the top, Emma looked back one last time at the place that had changed everything. "I'm not that person anymore," she said quietly. "The one who ran away in a wedding dress, too afraid to face the truth. But I'm grateful to her. Her crisis became my catalyst. Her worst day became the first day of my real life." As we walked back through the forest together, the morning sun breaking through the canopy in golden shafts, I thought about the unpredictable nature of crisis and transformation, how sometimes we have to get completely lost to find our way, how sometimes our darkest moments illuminate the path forward, how sometimes the people who help us in our worst moments become witnesses to our best ones. Emma had walked into those woods a year ago as a billionaire heiress running from a life she couldn't sustain. She'd walked out as someone forever changed, stripped down to her essential self, forced to rebuild from that honest foundation. And somehow, impossibly, I'd been changed too. I'd gone into those woods as a canine handler doing her job, and I'd walked out having gained a friend who would teach me that the work we do matters in ways we can't always measure or predict. We reached our cars, and Emma hugged me tightly. "Same time next year?" she asked with a small smile. "Same time next year," I agreed. As Nicole and Emma drove away, Luna and I stood in the parking lot, watching them go. My radio crackled. Another call coming in. Another person who needed finding. Luna's ears perked up, her body tensing with readiness. "Ready to go to work, girl?" I asked. She wagged her tail. "Always ready. Always willing." I thought about Emma, about Tommy Chen, about all the searches that had ended in triumph, and all the ones that had ended in heartbreak. I thought about the impossible weight and extraordinary privilege of doing work that matters, of showing up when people need you most, of being part of the moments that define and transform lives. And I thought about the lesson Emma had taught me, that every person we search for has a whole life ahead of them, full of possibility and potential. That the rescue isn't the end of the story, but the beginning. That sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get to see what happens next. Luna and I climbed into our vehicle and headed toward the next call, toward the next person who needed finding, toward the next opportunity to show up and do the work and maybe, just maybe, be part of someone's transformation. Because that's what this life has taught me. We're all connected by the moments when we need help, and the moments when we offer it. We're all just people doing our best, sometimes getting lost, sometimes finding our way, sometimes helping each other through the difficult terrain, and sometimes a routine rescue on a foggy October morning becomes the thread that weaves together two completely different lives into something neither person could have imagined. That's the real lesson. That's what matters most. Not the headlines or the recognition, not the gratitude or the rewards, but the authentic human connections that form in moments of crisis and grow into something lasting and real. Emma had been a lost bride. I'd been a K9 handler doing her job. And somehow, we'd both found something we didn't know we were searching for. A friendship that transcended every boundary. A reminder that showing up matters. And the understanding that sometimes getting lost is exactly what we need to finally find our way home.